Hi guys, welcome back to the Improvement Season podcast, or I could call this the Coaching Corner, although we kind of abandoned that platform a little bit. And now we just have the Improvement Season podcast. Yeah. And Mike Challis is on the show, coach Mike Challis, physio Mike Challis. He is our physio and he is a coach on the team. And he just finished his competitive season, so he's actually in his recovery diet, so recovery phase right now. He's almost in his improvement season, so it's very time appropriate. Because if you came on during your contest prep, it wouldn't be the improvement season. It would be like whatever.
On that note as well, that's why it's not appropriate to call it the coaching corner or the coach's corner, because we are here to talk about Mike's last contest prep and the entire season. And of course, also then how it is now to reverse out of it, what it is that you guys have been doing so far, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So it's almost the legit appropriate improvement season podcast from all three angles, nearly. So yeah, it's awesome.
Why is it nearly? Because you would still count this as part of the contest prep, the recovery period?
Hello?
Oh
yeah, we're still here.
Who was that? Was that? I thought that was directed to Steve, but
sorry, it was for
you. Everyone was just so still on my camera. I was just like, "Oh, is that frozen?" I guess like I don't know what your thoughts are, Steve, but for me, kind of, they're very. I think recovery is still, you're not quite in that improvement season where you're pushing things hard. You're really allowing the body to recover back to kind of healthy levels. You're allowing kind of, the food and the nutrition to do its job. And you're also recovering a lot of those kind of psychological perceptions and behaviors as well, I think, which are kind of also really important. So I think it's one of those, and I think it's really important actually, because, your body isn't able maybe to tolerate what you think it can tolerate. And maybe this is something we'll get onto in a moment, but there is definitely a kind of discrepancy between what a person can perceive they are capable of and what the body is actually capable of doing. And this is something which kind of, I think me and Steve kind of learned kind of throughout our contest prep, but again, for me, there was that big discrepancy between what the body is capable of achieving and what it can actually do or what it can actually recover from. And, so I think actually, even though a person might feel fine in quotes, they're not. And so again, that recovery phase is actually quite distinct, and it is important that you're not treating it like a massing or an improve or like your kind of peak mass or peak improvement season type thing.
No, absolutely. And it makes complete sense. And we are, of course, jumping the gun a little bit here, talking about the recovery period, but maybe it's a little bit of a reverse engineering approach. The thing that I always like to say with especially contest prep athletes when they are coming out, it's like a stock market or a meme stock. It's a better comparison, right? The market has crashed 90%. So your net worth is down 90%. And then it recovers by 5%, goes upwards, and you have that green candle. You get very excited. You feel so much better again, completely disregarding that you have just lost 90% of your net worth. And if you were to zoom out, you're still just at this scratch of feeling better in comparison where you've started.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
And it just takes so much longer to actually then recover all of that net worth again. And it takes a while, right? And I think that too many people then push it too hard. They're expecting to feel back to normal in a matter of no time. And also, often I have the feeling that people are getting a little bit impatient when it comes to that period of time. How is it with you, Mike? Does Steve help you in that regard? Kind of keeping you sane, keeping you on track? Do you sometimes get a little bit emotional when it comes to this?
Oh, definitely. And I think that was probably one of the primary reasons why, I signed up to coaching in the first place. Because, as logical and objective as I can be kind of outside with other things, actually like my ability to should I say like the way that I tend to overthink things and the way that my emotions can kind of hold me back sometimes is the primary reasons why, like, I came to Steve and I came to Revive Stronger in the first place. So, and even recently, you know, again, like Steve reminded me of, like, hey, you know, we're still in the recovery phase, you know, and it was that, just sometimes you just need that third party like perspective to just say, like, hey, look, this is where we are again, you know, remember what the intention of this phase is. So yeah, definitely.
And how is it for you, Steve, to watch the entire recovery period? Is it that, do you have the feeling that every athlete is kind of the same in that period, or is it that there's a stark difference between individuals?
From my experience, there's a stark difference. There's like, you have the kind of general philosophy of what you want to achieve during that phase, but everyone deals with it so differently. And I think a lot of it is down to personality type. It could be down, but I don't know if it's as much down to like how much weight they've lost, how lean they got. But actually, I don't think that's as big as a factor as personality type and then environment. So some people are like, maybe they have a family, and so like the family wants to go out and eat and kind of be like quote unquote normal, and the kids are having dessert and you want to have dessert because you're not in prep anymore, and that can quickly spiral, as we all know, with the hyperpalatable foods. And then you have, for example, someone like Mike, who is a bachelor, doesn't have a family at home at the moment, and is like very in control of his emotions, in control of his food, isn't like the huge social butterfly. And so that recovery phase is like, actually, it's almost like by the book. You gain 5% of your body weight or a bit more, and you should be recovered. And Mike is, as we were just discussing in his last check-in this week, 3 weeks post-show. And I really like this new thing that I've done with people in their recovery diet is like, out of 5, how you feeling? Or like 1 being total crap, 5 being back to normal on various diet fatigue factors, from libido to food focus to energy levels to sleep. And Mike, I think, went from like, hey, maybe mid-teens overall, and it is already at like 24 out of 25. So it's like almost completely back to normal after 3 weeks, which I wasn't sure I'd expect. And I'll also be interested because Mike talked about kind of sometimes your perception is not your reality, essentially. So you're perceiving it's back to normal, but maybe down a month in future, be like, yeah, you know what? Maybe I wasn't quite there. It will be interesting to see how it goes, because maybe you are there. It's sometimes you just don't know, because your new normal becomes your new normal in that sense. So yeah, very different, Pascal, at least in my experience.
Yeah,
I think like one thing that I reflected on as well is that we kind of, leading up to the WNBF Supernaturals, like we were kind of reversing, and it was quite an aggressive reverse as well. So for me, like I felt like that actually really sort of gave me a head start in my recovery, which is why I feel like probably it's been as fast as it has been up until this point. So I think that was a helpful factor for sure.
Yeah, and that we're kind of reverse engineering, aren't we? It's like recovery diet, we kind of reversed into the last show, like almost like the metabolic building phase or progressive linear load in a sense, which is what we did. And I don't know if I don't know if we want to start with Mike taking us through like the results, what you achieved.
Yeah,
that might be cool to hear about.
Well, like I think kind of almost maybe taking a slight step back. So I guess like so I competed in 6 shows this year, and I think, which I don't know, for some people that's quite a lot. For others, it's not, maybe might not be as much as some other people might have done. But because this was my first true competitive season this year, one of my primary goals was to really get experience, and also the WNBF Supernaturals was a competition that I really wanted to do my best in and do well in. And because it was one of the final shows of the year, I really didn't want to have that kind of like competitive nerves, almost that stage fright, almost, where you've got like the shakes and stuff like that. So like so like one of my primary goals was to get lots of stage time as much as I can, so that, you know, I look at least like, you know, I look fairly professional when I'm on stage. And then, and that led to me doing 6 shows, but with the shows that I kind of highlighted and wanted to compete in, they ended up being 5 shows back-to-back weekends, which on paper and beforehand, kind of it was kind of like, oh, it should be fine. But actually, it presented a really unique challenge, both from an athlete perspective and a coaching perspective as well. So that was a really interesting experience. Do you guys want me to carry on?
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, so in terms of like placings, so the first show that kind of I competed in was the MPA Novice, so the Natural Physique Association, and I actually so in that competition I ended up coming first. I won my class and I won the overalls, and I actually was given a pro card as well for the MPA, which was just incredible and really wasn't. I don't think they were necessarily intending it to be a pro qualifier. They certainly didn't sort of say that going into it, but I think with some of the caliber, some of the physiques that they saw, and with, I feel like with them wanting to kind of promote their pro class, like I think they made that so I was getting really lucky to doing that. The second show that I competed in was the UK DFBA Heart of England, which was that was a big eye opener because that was much bigger competition, a lot more competitors. The depth and the quality of the competitor was higher as well, so it was a big step up. I competed in the open bodybuilding short class, and I came second. Granted, there was only 2 of us on in that class, which was a bit of a shame, but nevertheless, they kind of felt that both of us were of a high enough standard to qualify for the finals. So that was really cool.
And that was tight, right?
It was really tight, really tight. And the judges said kind of on multiple occasions that, you know, it could have gone either way. And I think in the end, they just had to give it to someone. And I think and that's not to discredit my competitor at all, but it was just, it was basically like, you know, it's like what you talk about trump cards, Steve. It's like, well, he's got these qualities and he's got those qualities. They're the same, but they've just got different qualities. Essentially, it's like, what do you want to go for? So yeah, it was just so tight, and it was really interesting for sure. But then after that, I actually competed in a untested federation. I competed in the NABA just to again try something different. I liked the idea of potentially qualifying for the NABA universe. So that's why I did the England. And again, it was just an interesting experience. I then competed at the NPA British finals, which was good. And I came 4th in a very competitive class there. Then I went on to the UK DFBA finals, where I didn't place, unfortunately. And then kind of 2 weeks after that, there was a bit of a gap. And then we competed in the WMBF Supernaturals. So now, unfortunately, I think due to a combination of factors, like obviously my placings got progressively a little bit worse, but I think part of that was not only with the things we'll talk about in terms of kind of like how I looked and what things fed into that, but I think also the caliber of the competitions just gradually increased. So again, it was a really unique experience. I think, you know, in some ways, like when I won the overalls at the MPA Novice, that I actually felt a lot of pressure because it's like, I've done this well, like, oh, what if everyone's expecting me now to go out and win? And so I was kind of getting those sorts of thoughts in my mind. And so when I didn't actually do as well in the Heart of England, it was like, oh, that was a bit of a pressure relief. But then it was, just a very interesting situation to progressively get a little bit worse over the course of the season, which isn't ideally what you'd like, but hey, it's, you know, it was good lessons. So, don't know if you guys have got any questions so far or.
Go ahead, Steve.
Got any questions? I don't know if I have any particular questions, but I was just going to say with the NABA, where did you place at the NABA? Because you actually did all right there too, right?
Yeah, so I came second at the NABA as well.
Yeah. So you had good placings.
Yeah, so I came first, second, 4th, and then no placing.
And I mean, the UK DFBA and the WMBF, like those are super high caliber. They draw in international athletes. And in fact, I think, actually, no, ignore me on that point. I won't talk about that. So they're just incredibly high caliber and the athletes there are just completely wild. So not to say that like, hey, there's no way Mike was going to place at those. I think you could have challenged for that. But I think probably the thing to talk about is, like, on paper, back-to-back shows each weekend seemed doable. And I obviously kind of said I had some, like, just like, it sounds like a lot. I had some concerns. But then when we kind of thought about it, it's like, hey, again, Mike Bachelor doesn't have like a dog at home or something to deal with. Like, you have the flexibility and freedom to take like Mondays off work. Like, it was like, hey, there's lots of things in your favor to be able to just accumulate tons of experience and like put this to work. But that discounts the travel, the poorer sleep because of the weekend, the like booking in for tans, the financial investment, the post-show feels of maybe not doing quite as well as maybe you wanted, or even doing so well you have pressure on yourself, like those variables too. And it's similar to, we had a plan in place of, hey, we can actually keep getting better show to show by essentially like digging and then peaking, digging and peaking. And on paper, everything looked like it was going exactly how it should be. But in practice, you kind of peaked early in terms of at the MPA, where not only did you do your best, but you could argue that was your best look. And then as we gradually went through the season, that process just wasn't going how we expected it to. But there wasn't really time or the ability to maybe make a course correction at the time. Like, it just didn't seem like we needed to. It seemed like the thing that we needed to keep doing was the thing we were already doing, if that makes sense. That's at least how I felt at the time.
Definitely. And I think, but something which kind of I reflected on, and I think we don't give ourselves a bit of leeway on, but I think also other people don't take into account, is that it was our first season. We have no idea like what my best look was. Like, for example, one thing that we were that one of the main themes of our conversations was like my vascularity, because one of the things that we noticed about my physique is that I don't tend to get very vascular at all. Whereas someone like Rob, one of your other clients, he gets incredibly vascular. And so we were kind of tweaking things throughout some of the shows to try and see if that would result in more vascularity. But in the end, it kind of, I'm just not a massively vascular person. So it's those sorts of things which in a first season for, I think, any competitor or coach, you just can't be too certain about someone looking their best regardless. So I think that's something which kind of, I think we need to credit ourselves a little bit more for, maybe.
To me, so I find it very interesting to hear you guys talk through these things and observations and insights and valuable lessons that you've learned for yourself. And I would hope that many people who are listening right now can take this on board, so that if they arrive at the same crossroad or point in their physique, maybe, for example, something like vascularity, they think they are expecting that they would look as freaky as other people, and they don't, and automatically make the assumption that then something is wrong with their peak, or that in their head they have the idea of peaking and also competing back to back and think that's a great thing. But no one is there to tell them like, it's maybe not the best thing to be doing, because unfortunately, I know people most of the time need to do and make those mistakes themselves in order to realize whether it worked or whether it didn't. And most of the time it didn't. And then there is, of course, that exception and the few exceptions where that works out just fine. But I would really hope that people who are listening right now take some valuable lessons away from that as well. And when they are facing their next competition season, or maybe even probably the first competition season, that they think twice about maybe then back-to-back shows and also the expectations around their physique and going into peak week.
Because, sorry, Steve.
No, go for it, Mike.
Because I think in bodybuilding, like, sure, you're being compared against someone next to you, but ultimately you can only compare yourself against how you were previously. So, for example, like, you, Steve, or you, Pascal, it's like you're comparing yourself against maybe your previous season, and do you look better? Whereas if it's your first season, you've got nothing to compare yourself against at all. So everything is new. And I think you've just got to, that's why people have got to really try not to be disappointed, because what are you comparing yourself to? This is literally like just experimentation, finding out about things. So yeah, I just think that's something really important again for any first time competitor to bear in mind.
Yeah, I think that's what Pascal was saying, super valuable in terms of, hey, don't look at some of these other people and expect yourself to just be like them, because like you are, I would say if there's like an average of vascularity, you're towards like the end of the bell curve of less vascular than the average person. But we still tried increasing electrolytes, like we increased sodium, we actually manipulated potassium, fluid intake, like we're having like high carbs, like it just, nothing was really changing the look there. And it's just the same as Rob. It's not like we perfectly like found his electrolyte intake that made him really vascular. He is just vascular, like he is just that way. And there's different levels to this and different levels of look. I think something that maybe you were targeting in your head was a certain look for like your glutes, for example.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, people might be listening and be like, so if you're already your best at the first show, why did you keep digging? It was like, because there was still fat like to lose. At least you weren't kind of striated like through the glutes completely and like feathered triceps, stuff like this. But like even by pushing, it wasn't bringing more of that to the forefront. Like it seemed like more pushing is what that would bring, but it just didn't. And not everyone can be like a Dirk, but you don't really know how you're going to respond until you go through the prep. As Pascal was saying, like when Pascal competed, probably you didn't think at the start of the season you'd have like the glutes that came through like they came through. It's just like, oh damn, like those have come through. And it's like for me, that my last 2021, I kept pushing for like, hey, I want my glutes through at the rear, and they just weren't quite getting there. I was like, am I sacrificing other areas for just that? Maybe. And I think that's something that we kind of reflected upon, is like, I almost wasn't trusting what I was seeing when you were sending your check-ins to me, because I was like, oh, maybe the lighting's a little bit off. Maybe the video quality's not quite there. Everything should be moving in the right direction. It's like, and then when I was at the UK FBA show and we talked, I was like, and even leading into that, I was like, I think we're going to need to make a change, which is when we made the call to like reverse calories up into the WMBF. And even then, that did improve your look, but it didn't bring it back to the level at the MPA. It was like, it was almost past it. And I think the key, like the obvious thing was you were dieting too aggressively show to show. You were losing too much weight, which we both knew, but we had that discussion of like red flags. And I like, as Pascal knows as well, Mike is very stoic in his way of living and just like embraces the pain. And it comes back to that, like, hey, your perception is not necessarily your reality. Like you were sleeping, I remember saying, Mike, you're sleeping better than me. What's going on? But there was some things going on that maybe weren't obvious signs, but on reflection it was like, hey, maybe I did see something going on that would have indicated we're going too fast at that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think also just on that note, I think for all of us really, I think because we're sometimes not the most gifted of individuals in different ways, like I think we compensate for that with wanting to work harder. And again, it's that human natural tendency to think, oh, if I just do more or if I try harder, you know, I'm going to be better in some way, when actually, you know, pushing harder isn't the answer. Or it doesn't result in a better look. Like you said, being leaner or being more conditioned doesn't necessarily result in a better look. So I think there was definitely that aspect of, oh, I'd achieved some success at the NPA novice. Right now, I'm really going to push and I'm really going to get diced and nailed, thinking that I'm going to be better, when actually all that did was it resulted. So like, yeah, we were probably dropping like at least 1% in body weight per week in the middle of a contest season, week to week, you know, just pushing everything hard, you know, doing everything. But again, all that probably resulted in the end was, one, it reduced it expedited the fatigue accumulation from show to show. But then also secondly, which was, I think, the driving factor in, I think, that kind of worse look, if you will, was actually a drop in training performance in the gym. And this was really key. So it was really interesting because I noticed that around probably that third competition around the NABBA, that's when like I noticeably felt kind of I saw a drop in performance in the gym. But with it being my first season, I thought, okay, you know, this is normal, embrace the hard work, just keep going. also I don't like to be a burden on people. So I didn't want, and I knew Steve had a lot of competitors. So I was kind of like, oh, that's another reason I don't want to mention it. And so kind of there was this big drop in performance at the gym. And again, like I was just losing a little bit of that psychological kind of like freshness as well. And I think that drop in training performance really kind of, that worsened the look almost. And it was only when I did mention it in one of the check-ins that we were like, oh shit, and I think that was also around the time that we started to reverse as well. I think it was after the UK DFB finals that I mentioned that. So so I think, that's key. Like, and so just to summarize that, again, another big takeaway for people at home is that, training performance is a key metric, as has been mentioned on here in the past, but communication with your coach is just so important. Like, it just cannot be like so much. I'm sure you'll agree, Steve, that it's almost, for a competitor, it's better to be over communicative than under communicative, for sure.
I would like to say that, especially in a scenario like this, as a competitor, you should be reasonably selfish. Reasonably, just in the sense that, of course, it's not everything is revolving around you. The coach still has a private life. You should respect certain hours and all that kind of stuff. However, it is your season, right? If you need the support, then reach out to the coach, right? Such as in your situation, Mike, where you're saying you don't want to be a burden on your coach or on everybody, basically. I think in a situation like this, being reasonably selfish is the way to go. Reaching out because you need that other person, but doing it in a constant manner, like 24/7 in the middle of the night, waking up and calling the coach wouldn't be reasonably selfish, in my opinion. On that note, let's take a short break and be back with lots of good other takes then. One more thing then, and that is something that came to my mind now that you talked through it, Mike, and this is something that Steve and I even discussed, and I would like to hear your take on that as well. That there may be some genetic trait to it as well when it comes to the level of leanness that you can accomplish because of stress accumulation and fatigue accumulation and how the body is responding to it. To me personally, and Steve is the same way, I would very much think that those people who get insanely lean, right? Those Benjamins now, those Dirks, they have just that genetic trait that the body or the body's response to stress is not as severe as for the vast majority of other people. Yeah. What's your take on this? And have you maybe experienced the same thing where then the threshold was crossed and everything that then accumulated and compounded was just making matters worse?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think because obviously, of course, you've got ectomorph body types, endomorphs, mesomorph type body types. So I think there's definitely a genetic component to that for sure. I think also someone's background history is also really important. So for example, I was actually quite a chubby kid growing up, and obviously, like we know, you never lose fat cells, they only shrink in size. So if you were someone who was obese when you were younger, then actually probably your ability to get like absolutely diced is going to be less than someone who's always been a bit of a scrawny kid, or someone, those kids who are kind of like, a little bit skinnier, but they've just got all the muscle definition, So I think that, as always with so many things, it's a combination of genetics, your background exposure, environment, history. I think it's a combination of things. It's never black and white genetics and nothing. It's all of those things combined.
Do you not see the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We created the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we
get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger.
It's really funny. This is a tangent / it is associated with this. But Pascal's always surprised at how my body seems to respond to tattoos. Because in the moment, I remember actually my session that I had back-to-back days, my arm inflated like a balloon. And I remember in the session, I was like gripping on the pad, like it was real painful at times. And I was really like, I was just like, there's no way I'm tapping out. I'm pushing through it, blah, blah, blah. And I think it just made it way, way worse. Because it's similar here where it's just like, I can push through. I am mentally tough. But my body on the other end was just responding like shit. It was just accumulating water, super inflamed. Whereas other people, they could maybe go for a back-to-back, like, I don't know how Pascal survived some of his like back sessions, thinking about how would my body respond? I'd probably be a wreck. I'd probably be better off like splitting up over like double the number of sessions or something. And it's similar here with dieting, like, hey, a lot of us can mentally push, but if you're a really highly strong individual, or I don't know, the body just responds to stress in a certain way, you might have to diet a little bit differently. So yeah,
I think you bring up a very good point that is often overlooked, and that is it's not just about your mental capacity of what you can tolerate, but also your physical capacity. And some people have the ability to push harder mentally. Some people have the ability to push more physically. But if you have them both, it's probably the best bet or the best things that you can have as a natural bodybuilder. And often you don't have both at an equal level. It's that you can get away with one or the other more so. And especially when it's kind of you're a stubborn person, you can push through mentally, but the body may not be able to, then you're getting quickly to the point where then you're not making or seeing any kind of further progress, but you're actually digging yourself into the ground, not even able to see it and making regress in the process.
I think sorry.
Go for it, Mike.
I hope this doesn't jump off of it, but because that's why I often think when you mention that point, Pascal, is that when you see someone on stage, you have absolutely no idea what they've gone through. Like, sure, we've all dieted, but you have no idea, like, if that person was, 300 pounds, and they've gone from being morbidly obese to stepping on stage. And sure, when you look at them, maybe they're not the leanest person on stage, but from their story, you've got no idea the story. And like I said, they might have been dieting like someone else, but what it's taken them to endure that diet might be so much greater or taken so much more from them than someone else who's maybe done 6 competitive seasons and it's like, psychologically easy for them, So I think when we look at someone, we're seeing a physique, but we're not seeing or experiencing their story either. So I think that's something that I'm always reminded of as well.
On that note, guys, I would like to hear your opinion and take on it, because that has been crossing my mind a couple of times over the past couple of weeks. And it could be that I'm just absolutely ignorant to it, what goes into it. And I haven't yet talked with the not enhanced athletes. But I know that many enhanced athletes, and this is not that I want to generalize it here, but I just know that it is often like this, that they see themselves as being quite hardcore, which may be true because sticking some needles into your body is already hardcore enough. But I then see that they don't really often, not always, often achieve the conditioning that natural athletes achieve. And sometimes they even use compounds, dietary compounds such as, T3, DNP, other compounds that help in shedding body fat, still not reaching that level of conditioning and tapping out before that and still claiming to be hardcore. And once again, I don't want to piss anyone off here in me talking about it. It's just something that I don't understand, maybe because of a lack of information and context. And maybe someone in the comment section can comment on it to give me a little bit more of an insight around this. But what's your take on it? Is it that they reach that level of conditioning, but it's actually masked by water retention? Is it that the drug components have such a mental toll that this is their limiting factor? Why do you think that they don't reach that level of conditioning most of the time? That natties most of the time are just crazier when it comes to this? And also, what's your take around those things? Steve, do you want to start? Or?
If Mike has something offhand, I'll let him go first and I'll fill in some gaps if there are any. Otherwise, I can go.
I mean, ultimately, I think the biggest answer is like, I don't know specific details. Like one thing that I think we know probably might occur definitely more so in enhanced athletes is the difference between hypertrophy and hyperplasia. So where, rather than a muscle fiber cell split it, kind of rather than it kind of tearing and it growing bigger, it's actually you're getting a whole nother like muscle cell, muscle fiber altogether. Whether that plays an influence on it, I don't know. Certainly on a look, but obviously not the cycle. That won't play a role in the psychological component. I have heard people also talk about, obviously, performance enhancing drugs are drugs at the end of the day. Therefore, they are going to have side effects. And, I've heard people talk about, associated anxiety and stuff like that with maybe some of the drugs that they do take. And so whether the heightened level of those sorts of things influences them could be another potential factor that I could see. So yeah, I think all of and again, like it takes a long, it's a game of chemistry, and you've got more factors to play with. So it only takes one small thing to kind of just completely disrupt something. So again, all of those factors combined, I imagine, probably play a role in that. But I'm really interested as well, also in the fact that I don't know if you guys agree, but I find that when enhanced bodybuilders get beyond a certain size for their frame, they almost seem to lose some of that detail. Like, for example, I remember like Phil Heath or Kai Green, before they got really, really big, they almost seemed to have more detail, and you could see cross striations like on stage. Whereas when they got to their like peak mass, I just felt like they just didn't have the same level of detail. And I kind of reflected on that, and I was like, I wonder like why that is. But
yeah, absolutely. And maybe this is then why maybe it's a misconception of mine that they are actually getting that lean, but they are losing just that definition. Could be, I don't know. But it's exactly what I've noticed as well. And when it is that you're looking at very high level, elite, natural bodybuilders, they are, if you want to put a term on it, dry. Like that ultimate dryness where you're just like, I don't know, it's kind of like an anime where then there's the villain who just sucks out all of the liquids inside of their body. That's what they look like, And when it comes to enhanced athletes, that's hardly ever the case. And I'm just curious to know why that is the case, especially when they have those hefty compounds at their disposal. Because I know of people who have been doing DNP in the past, still do it when they are competing. And I just wonder why they can't even get as lean as naturals. And this is me, once again, just being blatantly ignorant to the fact. And maybe this is something that some people can cue me up about.
I have one small theory. I don't know if theory is the right term for it, but a lot of the sayings that come in natural bodybuilding come from the enhanced side. And the kind of typical saying a lot of people have is like, oh, I'm holding on to water. Like that will dissipate. It's like peak week will sort me out. And I wonder if that's carried through from the enhanced side where, like Mike said, some of these compounds lead to water retention, and they're like, oh no, I'm 5% body fat. I just need to get rid of these compounds, and like my peak week will sort me out. And then they go through peak week and they're like, oh, holy shit, like I was still holding on to like 10 pounds of fat here, not just water. I don't know. It's just like a thought that might happen where they're kind of ignorant to the amount of body fat they're holding.
To that extent then, Steve, if we were to extrapolate on that point, maybe it's also the fear of losing size and muscle mass.
Yeah.
Whether it's justified or not. just the thought alone that, all right, I'm seeing myself now in the mirror and I get smaller and smaller, such as we are seeing in the natural field as well, that so many people expect to have more muscle mass than they actually do. Once they are cutting down, they are shocked that they are only weighing 140 pounds already, right? And they still have like 5 to 10 pounds more to lose. And maybe that plays into that as well, that they can't fathom that they actually are lighter than they really think they are. And that they would have another maybe 5, 10, 20 pounds more to lose or so.
There's definitely an attachment to a number. It's like, like you said, Pascal, it's like, I can't possibly, weigh that little. There's no way there's no way I weigh that. Because it was quite interesting because, so when me and Steve first started working together, I think I was actually pretty lean when I started coaching. And I was probably around 150 pounds. And so we naturally thought when I'd compete this season that kind of, I think our initial aim for the MPA novice was to be around kind of like 150 or maybe slightly above that potentially. But I ended up being like 140 pounds by kind of around the peak time. I did have much lower weigh-ins than that anyway. But again, it just goes to your point, Pascal, about how I was actually to get stage lean. And that was with a 3-year kind of improvement season as well. Prior to that, I was actually below what we thought I would be. So again, I think it's really important people don't get attached to a number, and probably a number of people in the enhanced realm probably do. Like, I can't weigh under 300 pounds. No way.
I think probably especially there, because you're taking anabolic steroids to become the biggest version of yourself. And that automatically implies weighing more. And if you then end up only in reality weighing around, 200 pounds, and you're expecting to be on stage with 230, 240 or so, that doesn't really sit well with a lot of people, I think. And this is just me extrapolating from the natty realm, where I've definitely worked with people, telling them like, all right, I think that you will weigh around, also they're 140, because this is a very, very, on average, if someone is kind of, on the size of like 5'6" to 5'10" or so, well, many people would end up weighing, if they haven't the greatest genetics and they end up in the first season or something like this, and giving them to them, I often see the shocks in their face. And it's just like, what? I haven't weighed 140 in like my kind of youth years even,
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think you guys touched on a really good point there. And with Mike, I think, we saw some like 137s even like on the scale. I don't know if in reflection, that's definitely wasn't the right move to make. We kind of ended up going faster when we should have slowed down. But like you said, the performance piece wasn't something that, on reflection, I should have been like, hey, we're losing at this rate. I know on paper that's a little too fast, and I shouldn't have trusted so much in Mike can take it and he's feeling like he's fine. And I should have been like, hey, let's do some deeper detective work and like really dig into your training performance, rather than being like, hey, Mike will tell me if training performance is dropping. On reflection for myself, like that's something that I'll definitely do better as a coach. And I think it was like the relationship we had. I thought that I don't know if it's right to say I left too much to you in that sense. I don't like to say that because it makes me feel like I did a bad job, and I don't like to feel that way. But I think I could have been maybe more on top of that and seen that. But also, as we dieted down for the MPA, there was some levels of condition I was expecting to see that just didn't get picked up. And the only time I remember really seeing like, oh, this is what I was expecting to see, was I think like the night before the MPA show. And I saw like quad striations, you looking crispy. But past that, the video check-ins was what I know. We trialed your setup so long, it just wasn't reflected in those videos like it was then. And I still am like, I don't know what the answer is there to like get more there. And I think it is probably truly, how does Mike's physique respond in prep? Like maybe I was expecting to see something that wasn't ever going to come. I'm not sure. I don't know if that made sense, or if you have any thoughts, Mike.
No, I think I think the other thing as well is that like, again, for me, it was my first season, so I didn't know what to feed back on and what not to. And so I think, like, as a coach, it would have been an amazing learning experience, but it's also knowing that, okay, well, for a first-time competitor, you do need to be much more hands-on, regardless of how long you've maybe been working with them, because they literally just don't know, what to feel, what they're going through. So that certainly was the case for me. Whereas someone who you've been working with and it's their fourth season and you've been working with them a while, you probably don't need to do as much detective work necessarily, because you know them a lot better and they know what their season is like. But again, like, kind of for me, is it with regards to that, I think I definitely do, even though like I can push hard, I think I can be a sort of stressed person. So my body will hold on to water necessarily. So again, like, I think that definitely had an impact. And like you said, it was just unfortunate that, the lighting, we couldn't get as good as maybe we wanted it to have been. But yeah, so I think, yeah, massive learning experience going forwards, and, just, it doesn't mean things can't get better in the future as well, for sure, because you're just learning.
I very much like and appreciate your guys' approach, both very, very reflective, very objective as well, looking back, and also even admitting that things could have been better, because especially as a coach, Steve, I don't think it's an easy thing to be doing, to admit that you could have done things a little bit better, right? Because especially putting yourself out like this, you would want people to perceive you as perfect when it comes to this. That's why they are coming to you in the first place, because they are trusting that you are making the right calls for them in certain situations, right? But admitting that this isn't reality is, I think, a strength rather than a weakness. Because too many people out there, and probably coaches as well, they would never really admit if they've made a mistake, or they would also never really admit that they were the reasons why maybe an athlete hasn't really seen the results that they would like to, because they made the wrong choices, made wrong calls when it was their decision to make those kind of calls.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I know, like, I asked Mike, I was like, tell me if there's any red flags. These are the red flags. So I kind of had explained, like, training performance is one of them, but I didn't think the next step of what would Mike do with that information and think, oh, maybe this training performance, that's not a red flag, that's just expected. Whereas I wanted to know, like, hey, any drop in training performance, kind of to communicate that, of course. And that's, like, again, that is a learning of, like, for someone like Mike, again, he's very like, it's almost like a blessing and a curse, the kind of person that Mike is in ways, because it's like positive mindset, positive thinking, stoic, but then that might lead to, because I remember, for example, with Rob, he'd be like, Steve, I'm not gonna lie, things are feeling fucking tough. I can do it, but it's fucking tough. Whereas Mike wouldn't really say something like until afterwards, and when we started talking at the UKFBA, you're like, yeah, my energy levels have really dropped, and I'm like, okay, shit, all right, we need to do something, and that's when we made the course correction. And in hindsight's 2020, of course. I wish we'd done things differently, but it's all lessons, because in the moment, it felt like the right calls to make, and I think maybe I could have been more authoritative in my decision making, being like, oh no, Mike, I know you want to do this, but we're going to do this, and
but this can always backfire, Steve.
Yeah,
this is why it's like you said, hindsight is 2020. You always know better after the fact. You never really know it before the fact, right? And you could have been more authoritative, but maybe that would have been the wrong choice for Mike. Maybe that fits better for other people, right? You never really know up until the point when you went through it. It could have been with the same approach. You could have reached a different outcome, right? You never really know, because it's also like Mike said early on, each and every single prep, each and every single peak week is different. You can't really predict. Only because you may have the same body weight, for example, doesn't mean that the peak will look the same and that the body will respond the same, because everything around you, right, the atoms in the air are different and all that kind of stuff.
Literally. And something I think it's so important to, like, know that even it doesn't matter what season it is, you're not going to get everything right. And especially on that first season. And I think as a coach, it's so important to to hold your hands up and be vulnerable, to say, hey, I got this wrong, or I learned this, I didn't know this. And something that I was thinking about when you were speaking, Pascal, is that do you know what? It's really painful to admit that you've made a mistake, but actually, if you can really lean into that pain, you learn the most. Whereas actually, if you let your ego get in the way and you say, no, I didn't get anything wrong, you put your defenses up and you say like, no, it wasn't me, it was all, the client's fault or whatever, you completely shut yourself off to the learning opportunities that come your way. Whereas actually, if you can be vulnerable and you can sort of sit into that pain, that's when you can really learn. And hopefully if if the person on the other end is kind of a mature level, then actually they're going to really respect you for that even more. Because I think that's when it can really deepen your relationship with a client and, the coach and client relationship as well. So I think that's something really important it's hard, it's fucking hard, but as your development as a coach, and that relationship, I think it's really important.
Yeah. And it works both ways as well. Like for us, it was like, I remember saying to you, and it makes it sound like this prep's gone really poorly, but I mean, it didn't. It was all learning, and actually the results you got were still really good, especially as for a first season. But it's great for both individuals to be mature about it and don't expect perfection from one another, and just hey, now we've learned. And in fact, you actually did this because you had your competitive season reflections in the spreadsheet where you put in your reflections and I put in my reflections. It was just we came together and right, this is what we're going to do in future. It's just so interesting. Physiology is just interesting. Pascal was saying, things change week to week. You can't expect the same outcomes. And I remember we're doing our peak week adjustments. It was just not that much is changing. Your body weight was changing and nothing was looking worse many times. So it was we're not getting that visual change that we wanted. And I remember asking for biofeedback. We weren't quite getting the biofeedback we expected, which is why we experimented so much. So we've definitely learned, but we still don't have the answer for us, because even during that reverse, it was hoping this would just revive your physique in many ways. It was actually, maybe it was too late at that point and we just didn't get that. So yeah, the next prep is we're going to have way more tools at our disposal to just be right, let's really be careful about, particularly one, not pushing you too hard too soon and into the ground. And again, things change, so we can't expect you to respond exactly the same next time round either.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Cool. I guess we can then wrap it up, can't we? Because there was a moment of silence there.
We could wrap it up with Mike's I don't know, after this recovery phase, what your thoughts are going forward as a competitive bodybuilder. That'd be cool to hear about.
100%.
Oh yeah. So I guess so similar to you, Steve, and my long-term ambition, I would love to be a pro, a WMBF pro. That is something which I'm really gunning for. And do you know what? With the recent stories of Eric Helms and also I can't remember his second name now, but he's going out to World soon, Stuart McCullough or something.
The WMBF pro who's also a judge.
Yes,
from Ireland.
I think so, yeah. And so people like Eric Helms, Stuart, those sorts of people who actually they've been in the game for 10 plus years, and do you know what, they've achieved their pro cards, and I think that it is possible. So that's something which is definitely my long-term ambition and aim. But in terms of the next improvement season, so the major kind of feedback, I think, when looking at my physique versus other competitors, is just the sheer muscle mass. So it's really, as kind of cliche, cheesy as it sounds, it's to be a bigger Mike. It's just to be a bigger Mike. One of my strengths is my symmetry. So if I can maintain my symmetry, but just bring a bigger package, that is
Magic Mike.
Yeah, that's the key. And it's an ambitious thing, but I said to Steve, so one of my sort of outcomes for the next competitive season is to be competitive in both a national and international competition. So it would be to be able to go to, say, something like a British finals or a super naturals or a UK DFBA finals, and to be competitive enough to place in the top 3. That would be like a top goal of the next competitive season. Now, whether that happens or not, it doesn't matter, but I'm going to give it my best. And so this improvement season, tracking back from that, is all about just, using the tools that we know from the evidence base, and, using Steve's role model as well, and your role model, Pascal, and just get huge, basically.
Can I just say a really quick, slight tangent, but quickly? It's actually really interesting me just reflecting upon this as I was thinking about Mike's training. He's also on the slight bell curve of training. You've trained with him, Pascal, so you've seen how he can grind through sets. Yeah. And his volume tolerance is higher than your average person. It's just super interesting reflecting on that, and then reflecting how you responded in prep and how your physiology was, again, a little bit different to what the average person I've worked with. So just a complete side tangent, but maybe that's where, like, for me in future, if I have clients who respond very differently, I might be able to find that, like, some people in prep, they don't quite respond how I would expect them to on average. So, but excited for your future there, Mike. And actually those ambitions sound like ones that I probably have too, in terms of like a top 3 placing. And it sounds like, oh, you're selling yourself short, like a top 3 placing at British finals. No, you're not, because it's super competitive at that level. But I also like an ambitious goal. Like, I think it's within the realm of realistic for you, but it's still ambitious. So that's cool.
And finally, is that what something that I heard recently is, it's not the goal itself, and it's not about obtaining the goal. It's who you become on the way to the goal. So if you set a really small goal, you're probably not going to become much because it's such a small target. Whereas if you aim high and you have an ambitious goal, who you become on the way to that goal is likely to be far better than if you set a small goal.
I think on that note, this was a great ending, Mike. And there you can see that you're reading kind of philosophy and all that kind of stuff. Amazing. Fantastic. Guys, then thank you very much for tuning in and listening. I really do hope that you enjoyed Mike's competitive season, basically, or the recap of it. If you want to follow Mike has a Revive Stronger Instagram account, right? Yeah. It's Mike what is it, Mike?
Yeah, at Mike Revive Stronger.
Oh, it is perfect. You can find him there. If you have any kind of questions, if you would want to just chit chat with him, head over there. And also, if you want to, you can also leave a comment in the comment section below, because I know that Mike has access to the comment section. So you can even interact with him here. If you are not subscribed, then you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. It's always appreciated, and it helps with the algorithms. And I guess I speak to you guys next week with a solo episode, i.e. solo, just Steve and I again.
Cheers, guys. Cheers. Thank you, Mike.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality, and we know how to do it, and we will help you achieve this. The Minicut Movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the Minicut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The Minicut Movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.